Most people, including musicians, don't really understand how music works. We can all sing along with a good song, but when it comes to creating new music, it can seem like a mystery. So in this video, I'm going to show you a sneak peek of the music theory course that is over at Locals. Specifically, this is from lesson 1. It's the first part of the video that accompanies the lesson. The lesson itself is a PDF with text, illustrations, exercises, and quizzes, and the video helps to bring it to life. Where you are. You can hear good music in your head, so you want to share your songs with others. But the trouble is that it's difficult to translate your ideas into structured sound. So in this lesson, we'll take the first step toward the solution by learning to visualize music through color. And in the process, you'll discover the essential patterns that are at the very heart of music theory. What you will learn in this lesson. Here's a quick preview of what we'll cover in lesson 1. You will learn that all music is made from just 12 basic notes. That's all. You'll also learn how these notes got their names so you can understand the vocabulary of music. You'll then walk through the 5 simple steps needed to colorize these notes. Finally, you'll see how these 12 colors apply to the guitar fretboard in a logical and elegant way. Music is a language. Music is an amazing art form, obviously, which is why we're all drawn to it, right? Like a visceral beam of light, it shines with a clarity that cuts through the noise of everyday life to reveal the order and harmony of nature. Or at least it does when we close our eyes and just listen anyway, fully immersed in the audible structure of it all, and moved by the way it flows through our minds like a native tongue, so clear and coherent. Indeed, music sounds so intuitive that it feels as though our ears are already fluent in this language, because we can hear a song and it makes sense immediately. But what's strange is that once we open our eyes and try to visualize these same sounds, it's a different experience altogether, where the language understood by our ears looks utterly foreign to our eyes, as a mess of dots and lines and squiggles, right? I mean, it's such an odd thing about music, this dichotomy between the way it sounds and the way it looks, or how it's usually depicted anyway, because the difference is so extreme. And this gap in our perception, between what we hear and what we see, marks the divide between our ideas and their expression. Because as long as we're confused by the visual language of music, we'll struggle with the syntax of song, unable to fully articulate the music that we can hear inside. Do you get what I'm saying? And it's maddening, really. So what we need is a way to align our hearing with our sight. That is, to illustrate the patterns of music in such a way that they look as natural and simple as they sound, so that it's easy to translate one into the other. In other words, we need a Rosetta Stone of sorts to help us bridge the gap between the musical language of our ears and that of our eyes. Making the translation. For context, the Rosetta Stone was an ancient slab of rock found near the town of Rosetta, Egypt by Napoleon's army in 1799. Etched into the stone were the remnants of a decree in multiple languages, including Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were a cryptic form of writing whose meaning had been lost to history for more than a millennium. With the discovery of this artifact, however, scholars were able to decipher the hieroglyphs using one of the known languages also written on the stone. And as a result, they cracked the code to the otherwise unintelligible writings of ancient Egypt. So with that said, our musical hieroglyphs, as it were, are the cryptic symbols commonly used to depict music, like all the letters, numbers, dots, and images that are foreign to our eyes. And so what we need in our Rosetta Stone is another language to decode these symbols, a visual system, that is, that we already understand, and one, moreover, that not only explains the visuals of music, but that also mirrors the patterns of sound. So a system, like I say, that bridges the gap between sound and sight. Get it? And with this system, we can then crack the code of music theory, literally, since we'll be able to see sound to become fully fluent in the language of music. And the system we can use, the one that's already native to our eyes and minds, and that reflects the natural patterns of sound, is color. Though not just any random set of colors, but these 12 specifically. Of course, these colors might look a little strange at first glance, like some oddly scrambled spectrum, and honestly, they might seem a bit limited too, or even anticlimactic with only 12. But as you will see next, these 12 colors are the key to your success as a songwriter, because they explain how everything works in music, and I mean everything. The mother of all patterns. These 12 colors are fundamental to what you'll learn, and here's why. Because in the lingo of music, they represent what's called the chromatic scale, and it's the mother of all note patterns. You see, everything you hear in music springs from this basic pattern, from melodies and chords to progressions and entire songs. It is the essential set of pitches that serves as the ultimate source of structured sound. In other words, all music can be boiled down to the notes of the chromatic scale. It's beautiful, really, and totally simple too, as you'll see for yourself going forward. But what's especially cool is that the guitar is actually made from this pattern, where each string on the fretboard represents its own chromatic scale. So the instrument is just one big stack of scales, like this. As a result, you can see how these 12 notes are important in the language of music, and that once you understand them, you can quickly crack the code of music theory to unlock the songs that are inside you. The only question is, how is this pattern formed? Since it really does look weird as we observed. I mean, when I said that color is the answer, you might have envisioned something else instead, like the color spectrum, with all the hues in sequence, like this. After all, this is how colors are arranged in nature, not mixed up into some strange pattern. And since the word chromatic comes from the Greek word chroma, meaning color, we might assume that if anything, the chromatic scale would form a seamless rainbow of hues, so the guitar would look more like this, all natural and straightforward. And for that matter, what's up with these shapes too? All the squares and circles, that is, in their alternating sequence. What's the significance of this pattern along with the colors? Well, the truth is that there's a logic to these colors and shapes that's actually very simple once you understand it. There's just a twist to how you get there, literally. So to explain, let's take a closer look at this basic pattern to see exactly what it means and how it was formed in the first place. Cracking the code. Like I said, the chromatic scale is fundamental to music as the source of every pattern you play on the guitar. So without question, it's essential to learn as you become a master songwriter. In fact, the better you understand it, the better your music will be. It's true. Though admittedly, it's also true that these 12 colors look pretty scrambled when you first see them. Indeed, they even seem sort of random. So to make sense of what we're seeing, let's go back and reconstruct this pattern from scratch. Or better said, let's go back to before any colors or shapes are introduced, starting with some of the symbols traditionally used in music to label the notes. Then we'll walk through the 5 steps it takes to arrive at visible sound and our colorized chromatic scale. It's easy actually, and fascinating too. And in the process, you'll come to understand not only this color pattern, but also the standard musical symbols as well. In a nutshell, these are the steps that will follow. 5 basic steps. 1. Start with the chromatic scale. 2. Play the major scale. 3. Create the circle of fifths. 4. Add the color wheel. 5. Return to the chromatic scale. So here goes. Step 1. Start with the chromatic scale. The first step to understanding the chromatic scale is to learn the names of the notes, which musicians label using letters. And specifically, these are the letters used, along with some symbols called sharps, shown by a pound sign, and flats, illustrated by a lowercase b. Now I know this pattern is puzzling right out of the gate, and that's for 2 reasons really. 1, because it starts with the letter C instead of A, as you might expect, since A is listed first in the English alphabet. And 2, because the extra sharp and flat symbols are strange, like nothing we see in everyday language. So to clear things up right away, here's what you should know to begin. First, music is its own language, not English, and so it operates in a different way. And more importantly, these letter names for notes are arbitrary anyway, as you'll soon discover. So don't get hung up on trying to reconcile music with the alphabet, because they're not the same. Second, these sharp and flat symbols are objectively strange, it's true. And it's not clear why some of the notes have 2 letter names with extra symbols while some don't. So next we'll look closely at how these names came about to understand the logic of these labels. And what you'll find is that it's really not too complicated. Of course, these symbols on their own are confusing at best, but really they're not so bad once you know their origin, which is this. Initially, the note names were meant to follow the black and white pattern of keys on the piano, and that's why they look so odd. Do you see? While the white keys are labeled by letters alone, the black keys are marked by letters with sharps and flats, which is why these symbols form a staggered pattern. You see, back in the day when these labels were created, in the Middle Ages, musicians had no other way to reference each note. So what they did was to pick a few letters from the alphabet as a quick fix and named the white keys A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Granted, they could have just taken the first 12 letters of the alphabet, A through L, and applied them to the keys in sequence like this instead. But for reasons we'll explore later on, they started with the white keys and letters A through G. And the reason they used only 7 letters in total is because the chromatic scale is repeated up and down the keyboard in different pitch ranges called octaves. So they didn't need anything more than that since the same notes appear over and over again. Get it? That much makes enough sense, right? And if that's all there was to it, then the letter names for notes wouldn't cause much of a fuss, or at least it would seem so initially. But when you pause to look at this pattern more carefully, you'll see that there's also a catch, caused by the uneven spacing between white keys. And the snag is this. Because there are gaps, black keys, between the white keys, labeled A through G, we can't just assign 5 more letters to the remaining notes, like H through L for example, and expect the sequence to make sense. Because what we'd end up with is a jumbled alphabet like this. Right? I mean, it's pretty much up to the point of absurdity. So what musicians did instead was assign the same 7 letters, A through G, to the black keys as well, accompanied by extra sharp symbols and flat symbols to distinguish each note from the others, with the result that every black key was given 2 names. And while that may seem strange or even counterintuitive at first, and the resulting symbols look a little crazy, the logic behind these labels is simple enough once you know what they mean. So I'll explain. In music, the term sharp just means slightly higher in pitch. So the pitch above C, for example, is C sharp, because it's slightly higher than plain old C. Get it? Likewise, the pitch above D is D sharp, while the pitch above F is F sharp, and so on, like this. And in reverse, the term flat means slightly lower in pitch. So moving in the opposite direction, the pitch below B is B flat, while the pitch below A is A flat, etc. You see? So this is why every black key in the chromatic scale has 2 labels, or what musicians call enharmonic names, which are just sharp and flat synonyms for the same notes. So in total, the chromatic scale has only 12 basic notes, and that's all, even though the letter names make it look like there are more. Altogether, it includes 7 white notes, also called natural pitches, and 5 black notes, known as sharp or flat pitches. And this simple fact that there are only 12 notes in music is your key to understanding theory, the guitar fretboard, and the art of songwriting, as you'll see. But before you move on, take the first quiz of Lesson 1, and complete the first set of exercises to solidify what you've learned so far. Just download the PDF found in the lesson materials, print it, and write your answers directly on each page. It's easy. Again, the quizzes and exercises are a part of Lesson 1, which is only over at Locals. The link is in the video notes. And if you're ready to move on to Part 2 of Lesson 1, the link is also in the notes. And I'll see you there.